How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, today we're going to have a great discussion. We're going to talk about this question right here. Is management solely responsible for good employee morale? I wrote an article recently in the American Jail Association. It was published. It's titled the same. Is management solely responsible for employee morale? So we're going to go through the article, break it down, and basically see where the middle ground is. I mean, ever since I've been in corrections, it's been like a blame game. You know, like management could do more, management could do more, management could do more. And then when you have management who is trying to do more, the excuse is, can we trust them? Can we trust them? It's like we're always finding a way to put blame, and there's never no intentionality in trying to move us forward and to create in a workplace in which we can feel fulfilled. And I want people to know there's a difference between feeling fulfilled and feeling happy. Happy's fleeing. You're not going to go to work every day and be happy. It is what it is. But having said that, the value of what we do doesn't change. So having that level of fulfillment is really an intentional effort on your end to really find value in what you do, continue to maintain that value. And in the days when you don't, which really there shouldn't be days when you don't, but on the days where you don't feel that level of fulfillment, you don't go around blaming everyone else. I mean, this is something that you really have to take ownership of, because feeling fulfilled, you cannot put that in the hands of anybody else. That has to be in your own hands. So I think when I did this article, it was in an effort to bring intentionality into our own levels of fulfillment. And it's going to read the article, as I said, and me and Joe Pomponio are going to break it down a little bit. I think it's timely. I think it's something that needs to get out there because it's a perspective that hasn't been out there. And do I think people are going to agree with this perspective? I don't know. I don't think this is a topic that a lot of people want to explore from this perspective. But I think at this point we have to. I don't think we're at a point where we could just not explore this topic. So before I bring on Joe, let me just go ahead and let you know, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. This book is on the market, available on Amazon. This book does very well. So thank you guys for the constant support. If you guys are looking to purchase this book for you or your team, you can find this again on Amazon. Link to this is in the description. We also have this big book right here, How to Succeed in Corrections. This book is published by Blue 360 Media. It has tons of advice in this book, not just from myself, but from other people in the profession. And this kind of teaches you how to navigate the field pretty much through every level, from frontline to leadership. There's good strategy here. There's good tactical advice. That book, again, is available through Blue 360 Media. The link to that is in the description. Also, I just got a release date for my next book, which is this one, Tips for New Corrections Officers and Their Supervisors. This book is due out at the end of February. It's got about 46 more tips that can partner well with this book, even this book, but it really partners well with this book. I'm starting to come together with pretty much a lot of information that you could be handed, and just kind of, if you read it, it really should help you navigate through this profession. I wish I could say it's a catch-all, but this is pretty damn close. You could pre-order that now. Link to that book is in the description. I believe it's $39.95. It's a smaller book. It's got 46 tips, but they're good, solid tips. And again, that you could partner well with these other books. And when you buy the book, you also get a digital copy of that as well. So I would definitely look to grab that book as soon as you can. And as I mentioned, the pre-orders are available through blue360media.com. And the link to that is now in the description. And let me get Joe. What up, Joe?
What's happening, brother? How you doing?
Good, Joe. Do you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, or formerly known as the Texas Department of Corrections, of 30 years, and currently working in the jail division of our local sheriff's office, and a panel member for Tier Talk.
And you know, we always love having you. Now, Joe, real quick before we get to the topic, I did print out the most recent book I have, so there's some of the pages. Again, I'll probably get my copy soon, and then it's available for release on the 9th of February. But Joe, you got a chance to read it ahead of time. You also got a chance to kind of contribute your excellent thoughts, because I know you're in a good portion of this book. You, Russ, a couple of people that do frequent tier talk, including a couple of people that don't but are still in the profession. What did you think, real quick, on your initial reading for the first time?
Honestly, my initial reading of the book, most of the chapters were very on point. I was highly impressed, even with the correctional officers that weren't supervisors that contributed to this. Their quotes were professional, just solely on point, and the reading, the body of it that goes with the quote is just, I mean, it's just a smooth flowing book with great tips, great advice, great input from everybody. Man, I was highly impressed with the reading.
That makes my day, John. Just real quick, without going into too much detail, any chapters that you believe stick out? Because when I wrote this, I originally wrote this for new boots. But then my wife said, you know, what's funny is when you look back after 21 years of being in the profession, and you look back to try to relay what you've learned, what you know now, to people that are just coming in, my wife says, how do you know that's going to translate to them? Because again, you've grown, you cultivated, so how do you know those lessons could be translated? So I said, you know what, you're right. You still got to be able to give it to senior staff so they can go ahead and translate the messages that's being put in the book, which is great. I love doing that. That's what I did with the last book. I love being able to, here's a book to our training officers. Here's our book to those that want to kind of create a legacy with another individual. And these are some things you could talk about, make it your own, pass the good message forward. Are there any chapters there that you think had good, good value? Like, which ones would you choose as one of your favorites to read?
Honestly, I had quite a few. I had forgotten about the quote I'd given you about being dependable. That was a good one. A couple of my favorite ones were probably the ones that we discussed regarding that CO who made the quote about making a decision. I was highly impressed with that chapter, and there was a couple in there from Connie and Russ. Connie was the one that integrated the general teamwork from all departments, and her quote and the body of that was just awesome. Love that one. And the two chapters from Russ where he discussed the different contraband types, how to search, where to search, what type of contraband to be looking for. Very informative. Like I said, there was several chapters in there that I enjoyed.
Well, I know you keep praising Connie's quote, so I'm going to read it out loud real quick. It was a quote about you must make a decision. I know when I first gave you this to read, you texted me right away and said, listen, I love this quote from Connie. So I'm just going to read it right now. And again, this quote goes above the passage that eventually supports the quote. But this is what Connie says about making decisions. And I even added a side note to this, which was off a recent discussion that me and Joe actually had recently, which I felt like it would help you in regards to making the decision. But Connie's quote is, hold on. I'm over the age now. Let me get my glasses. In the realm of corrections, where the stakes are high and lives are affected by every action, rookies must grasp the paramount significance of making sound decisions. Their training and growth are critical to ensuring the safety of inmates, colleagues, and the community at large. It's not merely a choice. It's an ethical responsibility that shapes the very core of our profession. And as such, it demands unwavering commitment to the principles of justice, empathy, and the pursuit of positive change. Why did that quote hit home with you, Joe?
It's because of the fact of the broadness of the scope of the teamwork that she emphasizes in there, along with the initial responsibility and the individual responsibility for being there for all your coworkers and departments. The way she phrased it was just beautiful. And for with her from a medical standpoint, I think she bridges wonderfully the way a working relationship should be between departments, not just, security, not just medical, not just classification, the way she bridges that all together is just it's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Joe. I as I was going through it, it's funny because when you start getting to the publishing side, guys, if you ever decide to write a book, because there's a lot of us that do now, um, when you go back to reread it to make sure it all looks good, there's always things you want to add, and then you have to learn. You know what? Let me cut myself off because I'll be doing this all day, and then you wind up preparing for another book. But there was a thought when we touched on with liability and how we kind of make decisions in our best effort to kind of control liability. And we talked about safety, security, and care. And after we had that discussion, I think it was me and Russ or me and you, I forget. I was able to talk to the publisher and add those thoughts in, which is quick little side notes. But yeah, I'm very happy. Actually, I can't wait to kind of have all three together and just kind of partner this with me. I'm going to have one at work. And I don't know. I think at this point from the strategy, I think this serves good for management, but there's a lot of stuff here that's for the tactical. I mean, Russ devoted a section in there about searching and, you know, where do inmates mostly hide things? What type of things can they make weapons from? How to conduct a count. There's advice towards the very immediate level of job, you know, of the job. So, yeah, I really had a lot of fun creating this. And as I get more thoughts, I'm hoping to be able to revisit this at least until I retire. I will say one thing, though, guys. When you write these books are best developed when you're still on the job. So if you're thinking about writing a book, or at least I even talk about maybe creating a journal, it's going to be a lot harder for you to find this stuff if you're not going through it in the moment. So I think I'm blessed to be able to do this because I'm able to live it, journal it out, put something down, and then we have a discussion. And then it kind of either maybe for Joe or Russ who come back on the show, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And we kind of discuss it. But if you're not going through it, writing these books after you retire may not be as powerful as writing these books while you're going through it. And I will mention something too, when you're writing this, it's not about a resolution. It's about just, you know, putting out there what a concern is and what your perspective is on the concern. That's all, because I found out that you're not the only one going through it. That's the key. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a teachable style book. There's plenty of great topics in there, but it's one of those things, you know, it's about getting the information out there and letting everybody else know that they're not the only ones going through these same scenarios or situations.
Yeah. Now, what I want to do is I have an article about employee morale that I want to go ahead and kind of break it down. And I believe, as I said, this article is timely because, guys, listen, I've been in corrections now for over 21 years. And I know everybody kind of says that the employee morale, oh, it's gotten the lowest it's ever been. I heard that when I came in 21 years ago. So I don't know if it's really the lowest it's ever been or if that's something we've just gotten used to saying. And then sadly, have we also got used to accepting it by just putting blame on everything else as opposed to maybe switching the blame and finding some intentionality and shifting your perspective. Now, will some people disagree with me? You could, but having said that, I don't see nothing wrong with making an effort of trying to create a workplace that is better for us and where we feel fulfilled. But Joe, before we get into what we're going to read here, morale has always been an issue. I think now, as I got a couple years left, one of the things I want to do is create something that really does help staff get some momentum in the right direction when it really does come to embracing some good employee morale. But I feel that we've gotten either so used to just accepting the way it is, as opposed to maybe finding new solutions. We talked about this before, where people will rather work around old problems than to really disrupt themselves a little bit to find a new solution to something. And the blame game, where it just becomes easier to blame as opposed to, let me look inward and let me see if there's something I can do about it. Like, I've been in this profession for 21 years. It's not the easiest profession. Oh, actually close to 22 now. It's not the easiest profession, but I still enjoy it. Now, granted, if I allowed the profession to get to me, I wouldn't have. But then there's something where I'm like, nope, not going to give the profession this today. I'm going to go ahead and, keep my mind right, really embrace the value of the work and find something inside me where the value of the work still matters and use that to push me forward. So after 25 years of me doing this profession, I could say I've done something of value, where as opposed to I remain miserable. And after 25 years, I think I wasted 25 years of my life. But Joe, you started the profession before I did. I'm sure people were saying the same thing. Morale is crap. Morale is crap. We're at an all-time low. And then here we are, almost 30 years later, and still living that same belief.
Yeah, I mean, morale is, bad for two reasons: either bad management or individuals in the rut. Ultimately, us as individuals, we're responsible for our own well-being and our own morale thoughts. It's not solely up to supervision. Supervision has an ultimate hand in it. But us as individuals, we're the ones that make or break our own morale. We don't have to sit back and just accept things the way they are. We can step up and change things the way they are. It shouldn't be solely one person's responsibility or another. I mean, everybody is responsible for morale, not just supervision, not just the correctional officers, not just the administration. Everybody is responsible for morale. It starts with us as the individuals. We're the ones that can change the outlook of our own perceptions as the way things are in the daily operations. If we don't like it, we can change it. That's what's great about being an individual. We can change our own actions. We may not be able to influence everybody else's actions, but we can start with changing our own influence. And, once you do that, influence is kind of contagious. If you do it long enough, other people tend to jump on the wagon, and, before long, you start seeing things change.
Yeah. And Joe, I'm involved in trying to build the employee morale in my state. And I find myself defending the efforts, where if you are willing to do something and create something great, you figured you would have more support in the process. And guys, this is not just specifically with me. I'm just saying in general, because I'm not the only one trying to do this across the country or maybe even internationally. Not even this. I'm not the only person in a profession trying to do it. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are trying to create good morale, but they may not feel supported because people are just either wary of the effort, whether they question it, whether they don't want to put too much of their own energy to it because they believe it's going to fail, or they've just gotten so used to the status quo that they're more comfortable being complacent. And at that point, it's like, well, you know what? I can remind them of the urgency of having good culture in hopes that it will lift them up and move them forward. But you can only do so much. I mean, that's the thing. You can only do so much. So I think a topic like this matters because I think if we embrace a culture in which management's always to blame, then we victimize ourselves and then we make no effort to create change because you know what? Can't do anything about it. It's management's fault. It's management's fault. And it's like we live on this belief, which later becomes this really crazy assumption, that even if there is good management, it's easier for us to believe that everything they do has an ulterior motive that is meant to destroy us to some extent. So I would like to see if while we're having this dialogue, if we could shift past this negative belief by making us kind of think, are we just assuming at this point? Yeah, we could have bad days. I get it. But when we talk about bad management, is it really management in general, or is it an individual that we really have to talk to, or do we find it easier just to kind of assume it's management? Because I don't want the conflict of having to deal with management Joe personally. So I'm just going to say management sucks. And another thing is my interaction, let's say with Joe, could be a lot different than Joe's interaction with Russ, but maybe because I'm so pissed off at Joe, I start passing out this wrong information and everybody starts believing me because I'm the one that's more connected to the front line. So again, the generalized assumptions, I believe, are a very big concern when it comes to employee morale, because I don't know if management's always in a position to defend it, but the people that start those generalized assumptions are probably more immediate to the people who actually need to break away from those generalized assumptions. So they keep fueling it and fueling it. And next thing you know, Joe doesn't get along with Russ, but it's not because Joe's ever done anything to Russ. It's because Russ has been caught up with the generalized assumption, the sweep of it all, that now Russ starts speaking in generalities. Yeah, management, management, management. Now, the scary thing about this is, even if you have good management and there's this cognitive dissonance, or there's this conflict between, well, yeah, Russ is a good, or Joe is a good manager. Yeah, well, the only concern is Joe is not like the rest of them. So the moment you do get good management to come up and start doing the right thing, you individualize the effort and say, well, Russ is different. Russ is not like them. It's like, hey, guys, no matter what we do in trying to create this positive environment, even if you do have a manager who is trying to do the right thing, they're going to be considered opposite in what we believe is expected from management. Does that make sense, Joe?
No, it absolutely makes sense. Especially when you have one person that's coming in doing the right thing, and just like you said, when it comes to the blame game, the first thing is Joe's not like Anthony. Anthony's not like Russ. It's come to a point where, in my opinion, we need to ask, when it comes to morale and trying to change the culture of morale, we should be asking the question, why the hell not, instead of just why. Nice. I think if we did a lot more of that, asking why the hell not, instead of trying to fight not so much the change, but the attempt to raise the morale, I think we'll find ourselves in a much better place.
I like that. And guys, I want to mention something before we go into the article here, is that change in the workplace, especially because we're talking about culture change, it can't be done alone. And because we've worked in a system that may be complacent towards how the culture is already is, so I'm not going to just deal with it. I'll just deal with it. I think people that are creating the change have to initiate some level of urgency. Like, however you want to express that urgency. For me is I want to have a career that means something to me. And again, I have a couple of years left. I mean, when am I going to plan on doing that? And for those that feel the same way, like after 25 years, what have you contributed? Well, this could be that level of urgency, because you only have one life. And if this is your career for 25 years, I don't want you leaving it thinking that it was a shit career. So if that doesn't give you a level of urgency to break away from this blame culture where it's everybody's fault and there's no need for me to create anything different, then it's just sad. So again, if you're trying to create this change, you got to initiate a level of urgency. But also, I want to mention one other thing that may be forgotten, is that you got to connect with people who believe in it. And it's not going to be the masses. It's going to be a small amount. And then you're going to use that small amount to create influence over the other people who may be slightly resistant. When it comes to creating change, especially at mass scale, you can't just hit the masses right away. There's too much resistance. You haven't built credibility. It's not going to happen. So you have to bring it to a group of people first that believe in what you believe in. You guys have the same vision, the same, you're aligned with the same goals. And then now you got their buy-in, and then you could borrow on their influence as we try to create create an environment that we all want to feel a level of fulfillment. Because there are times, even in my life, when I go to work and I'm just not happy, but that doesn't negate the fact that I don't feel fulfilled by the work that I do. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely not going to change the thoughts of the masses right off the bat with the selection of a few, but ultimately in time, you can definitely change the outlook of the masses with the selection of your few. Everybody's had their shit days where they've gone to work, and it wasn't necessarily the day you wanted or the day you got, but it wound up being the day that it was. And it's just one of the things where it's not anybody's fault. It's just ultimately it's what you make of it. The easiest way to promote positive change is to put it out there, see who steps forward, and take those few and give it some time and start working with the masses. And ultimately over time, you can change the morale, you can change the thought of the masses without running them straight into the battlefield, 3 against 1,000.
Yeah, I think this is something that I'm going to express more in conferences. Maybe even me and Joe will be always available to kind of teach what these thoughts are going to be. Again, with me and Joe are very big on interactions. It's not like we're going to go flood everybody with PowerPoints, but I think it's about pointing people in the right direction. So I'm going to read some of this article, and then we're going to kind of stop and just discuss certain points. So, Joe, if there's something that you catch right away that you want to discuss, just kind of give me the nod, and I'll stop right off. I'll stop right there, and we go and break down the discussion. So this is the article. This is in the AJA, most recent digital magazine. I put a link to that in the description so you guys could check that out. I also have a link to the 19 tips for interacting with inmates, which is actually doing very well. Both those links are in the description. But the title of this is Management Solely Responsible for Good Employee Morale. And I kind of want to break down this article. And I'm thinking about doing this more often as well. I'm starting to read a lot more that's on these like in these publications, also on the Corrections One website. I like reading the personalized articles, the articles that are built on experience. It's not like stuff that's trending in the news, but hey, here's a senior officer talking about best way to walk a tier, blah, blah. I love reading those. So I'm going to try to start getting them on the show to break down their submissions, because a lot of them are willing to come on the show and discuss their articles. So right here, is management solely responsible for good employee morale? So that's the question. And I think me and Joe agree that it's a partnership effort, right? So let's start off with the right momentum. Joe, would you agree good morale is a partnership effort, both passed down and raised up, right? Would you agree with that, Joe?
It's absolutely a partnership in both directions.
Right. Okay. So first thing I say here is nationally, the employee morale for our dedicated correctional staff is at an all-time low. I'm kind of going to do the agreement with everybody else, even though I always think it's been a problem. I do. I think it's always been a problem. But again, the trending thought is that we're the worst it's ever been, which maybe it is the case. But the point is, what have we done since you realized it? So when people say, yeah, the morale is low, well, what are you doing about it? That's always going to be my next question right now. What are you doing about it? And I'm okay with saying that because I'm doing my best to fix it. It's not like I'm hypocritical. I want to know what you're doing about it because I'm doing something about it. So what are you doing about it? So if you're going to come and say it's low, what's your effort? What are you trying to contribute back? Reasons may vary as to why, from low pay to bad management, from unfair changes to anti-law enforcement rhetoric, or some combination of all the above. Many staff have found themselves in a never-ending cycle that centers the blame for their happiness, their value, on areas that they cannot control, where they have no individualized ownership or accountability. Now, Joe, I know you're in agreement with this. I would love for your thoughts on that. The constant external blame over things that you cannot control can give you a sense of feeling trapped. So therefore, if you're not planning on leaving the profession, because I'll ask people, hey, if you're really focused on things that you cannot control, because I'm not saying, it's not needed. Of course, these are needed, but are you going to leave the profession? No, I'm not. Okay, so if you're not going to leave the profession, and now we're talking about just having a positive mindset, is it worth 100% of your time, 100% of your energy to constantly be focused on the things that you cannot control? Or will that leave you in a state of feeling trapped and hopeless?
Yeah, when it comes, a wise warden told me a long time ago to worry about what you can control and don't worry about what you can't control, especially if you can't change it. So, when it comes to outside influences, whether it be political, media driven, whatever the case is, don't take it to heart. Don't let it ruin your individual initiative and your passion for the job, because there's nothing you can do to change it, because we all said it before, bad media is good press. A lot of the times media does not see the intimate size of the penitentiary and what we do on a daily basis. So it's one of them things where you never let outside influences influence the way you do your job. You're going to have the naysayers, you're going to have the haters. It is what it is. It's just, every job has it, but don't let it ruin your individual passion or your individual fulfillment of the job. Continue to do the job, and it's just, worry about what you can control and don't worry about what you can't.
Yeah, and it's important because, as I said, I love what Joe's saying. If you're focusing your energy on things that you cannot control, things that you barely have an influence in, then you're wasting energy, you're draining yourself, and at the end of the day, you can't put energy towards the good things. In a scenario here, I had a supervisor who was very concerned about external incentives, more so with the pay. The pay was the big thing. And then I said, hey, how many years you got? And he's got about 23. He's got 2 years left. And I said, are you planning on leaving? No. I said, okay, so at this point here, being that it's out of your control, maybe you should shift your focus, because you're going to wind up, literally just trapping yourself. And the reason why I know it's having an effect is because the agency is giving this person people to connect to and share a legacy with, new people, and say, hey, listen, you could train with this individual. And this individual, instead of taking advantage of that, winds up expressing the negativity of not getting higher pay. And now, again, this is a chance to have a positive interaction, a chance to go ahead and create a legacy with that individual, which I would want. So give me the new people. I'm willing to share and express the value in this profession, so this person, knows it right from day one, so they can handle the negative. I mean, that's another thing. There is negative in this profession, but if I could build a foundation of value, that will help us work through the negative. But now the person is so concentrated on the external incentive, something that he cannot control, that when he goes to have an interaction with a new person, a new staff, in which I can create a legacy, because this person is 23 years in. They got to be getting ready to pass the torch. That's the key. I'm going to pass the torch. I mean, do you want to pass the torch where it's already out, where there's no flame, there's nothing burning, or keep the fire going? Keep the fire going. So I think when they have that negative mindset and they focus on things they cannot control, it affects their ability to create an impact with someone. Because at the end of the day, now this person that you had a chance to create an impact with is looking at you, and instead of you motivating them, they're like, nah, I just don't want to be you in this profession. I mean, I kind of knew what I was getting into a little bit, because, again, we have a lot more resources now that show people what it's like to enter this profession of corrections. It's not like it was before. I mean, a lot of people are going in now less blinded to some of the realities, even connected to people who work the profession. But when we promise them that there's a lot of negativity, there will be, but you'll be connected as a family and the value of the work that's being done, and we sell it on for me, the work has value. That's not a lie. And there should be a family here. So to me, that's not a lie. And then when they go in, they feel disconnect, and they have someone that really is incentivized by money, which runs thin pretty quick, that doesn't talk about the value of the work, the impact you could be creating, whether it's with your peers, community, whatever it is that you're doing, but they're focused on the money. Well, you're not selling the profession properly to someone who has day one. So while that person says is, well, I thought this profession had more value, but when I look at you, Joe, you look miserable. So that's not who I want to be. But now the funny thing is, even though Joe is upset because he's not making the amount of money that he should be making, and I get it. We need more. I'm not saying that. That doesn't lessen the value of what we do, because that's the reason why we want more money. So how do you say the profession is shit and I want to be paid more, when you should keep the value of the profession, translate the value of the profession, and use that as a way to defend the wants of making more money? Because now this person leaves the profession and literally says, because they're probably not in a mindset to separate the person from the value of the profession, and they'll just generalize it up like what we always do and say the profession is shit. And that's why they make what they make, or whatever it is. Your chance to impact someone is now gone. And I think that truly does relate to feeling trapped, because all your energy is focused on things that you cannot change. Joe, I got to get your opinion on that, because there was a lot there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, let me start at the beginning. We're talking about the legacy you leave behind. You got to ask yourself, do you want to be remembered as that old disgruntled burnout? Or, do you want to be remembered as the person who left, a piece of yourself still with the people? One of the best things for me as a retired lieutenant to hear is when I go through town and I see one of my former correctional officers or supervisors, and they thank me to this day for what I've taught them, what I've done for them, the way I carried myself, the way I supported my people. That in itself makes the 30 years, even with the bad days, worth it. You got, at some point you have to ask yourself, am I happy being a disgruntled burnout, or do I want to leave something positive behind that could ultimately affect somebody's new career, when you're retired 2-3 years and you're still being talked about in training academies, as an individual. That's the kind of legacy you want to leave behind as a teacher, as an instructor. You never want to pass that torch, burned out to anybody, because it'll never get lit again. The money issue has always been a problem. It's always going to be a problem. No matter what state, no matter what agency you work for, we'll never make enough. We could get 4, 5, 6 raises and it's never going to be enough. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, are we doing enough of our job duties for the pay that we're getting now? Have I spent more time being disgruntled and being complacent and being upset and pissed off every day, not doing what I'm supposed to do for the amount of money I want now, to get a raise? What happens later on down the road? You get that raise and you're still pissed off. Again, it's not a total culture. It's an individual. At some point you've got to get yourself out of that rut.
Joe, you're spot on, because to be honest with you, the external incentive is really motivation, but it's not really a motivation that lasts as long. It just kind of runs thin, especially because this profession is very challenging. So you really need to be inspired and not so much externally motivated, because the inspiration that you have and the value of what you do really keeps you going through those negative times. Where if I'm just being motivated by external incentive like money, it is going to wear thin, because most people will wind up saying, yeah, this isn't worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. You hear it all the time. And it's like, you could get paid as much as you want. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. But if you believe in what you do, and the drive is from inside out, then yes, then the negativity really doesn't hold any weight. And the good thing about that is, if you believe in it from the inside out, the people you can impact are going to feel that. They're going to see that. And I don't understand how you would not want to share that, especially because you've devoted, whatever, it could be up to 25 years of your life. I mean, you're the biggest thing about, what you do in your life is really what you leave behind. And if you're just not, as I said, to keep that torch fueled, and then you wind up leaving, you're going to wonder if you could have done more, because I don't know. I think everything we do has to have a service to others. And here you are given the opportunity to do it. You're given the opportunity to talk to someone who literally started day one. How could you not want to embrace that and get all involved in trying to help that individual be the best that they can be? So maybe later on down the line, when that person is successful, they can go back and they could remember who you are. There's a great book called The Power of Moments. It's by Chip and Dan Heath, and it talks about the importance of kind of being remembered and creating legacies, and who does not want to be a part of that? I don't want to, die feeling insignificant, and granted, yes, there is an impact I can make with my family. I get it, but it doesn't have to stop there. I know there's a lot of people like, well, I do with my family. Fine, but why not do with any life you can interact? Why does, it's kind of like an excuse just to remain miserable at work. Like for me, it's interaction with a life. Of course, I'm going to put all my effort in having great interactions with my family. Of course, that's my family. But that doesn't mean I have to, be shit to the people I work with and not create a positive interaction with them. Why can't I do both? Why can't I just say that every life that I had the ability to connect with, I was able to give them the best of me in my efforts to be remembered? All right, Joe. So eventually I would like to maybe when I do retire, and I know I've been successful at creating an effort of good, positive change, this may be something that I would like to culminate into a book. But again, this is something I really got to make sure I'm doing it correctly. Now, Joe, I'm going to continue reading. If there's something you want to hit up on, or you want to explore more, just kind of give me a nod or a finger, and I'll stop.
Okay.
As long as I could complete the sentence.
Right.
I'm a little out of breath because I paused to run upstairs to check on something and come back, so it looks a little different. I didn't run out of breath just sitting down. That's how it starts.
It starts with the glasses first, then you wind up out of breath. Yeah, that's how getting old, isn't it?
Yeah, because they'll see like a little bit of they won't see the in between. Okay, so even though there are some major influences that have the power to sway an individual into feelings of hopelessness and regret, there may also be a level of intentionality on staff that allows for those feelings to settle without any form of resistance. Sadly, it seems to be a developed partnership that drains staff of their individualized investment in creating and maintaining their own happiness, regardless of the circumstances. So at this point here, Joe, I just mentioned that I think there is people that just accept it as this is what it is. This is what it will always be. And then even though they've accepted it, they still blame other people. It's like, yeah, but you're not making an effort to create any change. If correctional staff constantly look outwards for happiness without any intentional effort to shift their perspective, to shift how they currently view the world, they will never, and I mean never, escape the negativity that constantly surrounds them. Eventually, they will develop a mindset where hopelessness, sadness is justified. It becomes the norm, and momentary happiness needs an excuse because staff may actually feel guilty. Either way, without an intentional effort to fight against the negativity, without any effort to shift perspective, correctional staff will find themselves in this never-ending cycle of minimizing the good and maximizing the bad. Joe, what's your thoughts on that? Because that to me is worth exploring just a bit.
Yeah, I mean, for me, outside influences, I don't even, when it comes to like news and stuff, half the time I don't even watch the news anymore because most times it just pisses me off and turns me into a bitter individual. And if you keep yourself in that rut and hold on to the negativity and not even give the positivity a chance, you're still going to remain a bitter individual. The whole change, the initiative to change morale starts from within us. Not a single individual, outside of us, but us ourselves. And if you continue to let yourself be not so much browbeat, but beat up by your own emotions and by your own feelings, ultimately you're the one that's got to take a look at yourself and ask yourself, why are you so resistant to change? Why are you so resistant to positivity? Is it because of outside influences? Is it because personal issues within yourself? Ultimately we're responsible for the way we portray ourselves. We're the ones that need to make that change. That's up to us.
And it's also, as we mentioned before, that generalized assumption that, I think we find it easier instead of holding people accountable, we connect them to the department and generalize their actions to what that department's all about. I have bad interaction with management or bad interaction with Joe. It's all the management. A bad interaction with a service provider. It's all of service providers. We have to move away from that generalized assumption. It really does destroy and create a divide. Now, to be honest, this mindset can also cause a level of paranoia in staff, as all good efforts to create positive change or increase employee morale get questioned. Be advised, when I say question, I don't mean questions that are built from a state of curiosity. I mean questions built from a state of judgment. Instead of seeking an understanding behind how a good initiative can add value to the workplace or the workers, all that surfaces is judgment on the intent, the motives behind the initiative. Why is management doing this? Sadly, the staff that asked this question may already believe that they have the answer. Now, with that said, the above concern is a beast of an issue to resolve. It contains within its roots a hopeless acceptance by staff of the way things are and the way things will always be. This acceptance erodes the trust needed to create and maintain positive initiatives that involve a shared invested partnership between management and front line. If that partnership doesn't exist, if that is not a shared investment, and more importantly, no trust, the timing of the initiative will only create further divide. So I want to mention that again, because I don't know if I skipped the line in this, but this acceptance erodes the trust needed to create and maintain positive initiatives that involve a shared invested partnership between management and front line. If that partnership doesn't exist, if there's not a shared investment, and more importantly, no trust, the timing of the initiative will only create a further divide. So basically, without trust, without a shared investment, the good intent behind the initiative gets minimized, and what surfaces are the negative feelings of a hopeless and maybe even, as perceived by frontline staff, a selfish effort from management. Think about this, Joe, and this is what matters. And again, if we ever do create a book on this, or a class, or just even a dialogue, if we don't create trust between frontline, between departments, between management, whatever it is, and we go to initiate a good effort, if there's no trust, the effort is going to get scrutinized. So you still have to make sure that before you try to throw that pizza party or whatever, I mean, a little superficial, but before you make any effort to move forward with doing something that you feel can increase morale, you still have to make sure there's trust somewhere in there. Because the funny thing is a lot of people may think this differently. The event is not meant to build trust. It's meant to continue the momentum. So, and what I mean by that is you need to already build the trust before you start these events. Don't get me wrong. It will keep the trust moving forward. It will. So it will cultivate it, if you want to use that word instead, but it's not going to start it. It's not going to start it, which means that if I'm management and I'm trying to build a rapport at my front line, before I do some crazy morale shift where I'm going to implement something, I need to make sure I understand where the conflicts are, try to see if I could bridge any of those gaps before I push a good effort forward. Because if there's no trust and I go to push the effort forward, the effort, no matter how good it is, it's going to be scrutinized. Because at that point there, it's about the messenger. It's about me.
Yep.
It's about my attempt. Or my intent. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Your intent has to be genuine, first of all. All too often we hear about these shift supervisors who, we'll use the pizza party as an example, who are throwing the pizza parties because they're trying to buy loyalty instead of helping maintain morale that should already be there. If you're using the aspect to buy your loyalty, then you have a bigger problem than what you're trying to do. You should already have the trust of your staff. You should already, your staff should already know that you're genuine towards their concerns. You're genuine towards their well-being at work. Even their well-being off work. They should know that you're being genuine. At these pizza parties, I've seen supervisors use it as a way to me, it seemed like they were trying to buy the loyalty of the people when,
Right.
in fact, you should be using it to maintain a relationship and let them know, hey, I'm doing this because I appreciate you guys and what you've done for me so far. I wholeheartedly appreciate it. The other aspect of this too is that, we're talking about the management being blamed as the individual. A lot of the frontline staff don't understand, and I'll use policies and procedures as an example. Policies, we all know and we all understand that policies and procedures are going to change. They're passed down from admin through the supervision down to the frontline staff, changes in the way we do things. It's up to the individual supervisor. If he's already got the morale, if he's already got the trust of his staff, if he's already got a good working relationship in both directions, from supervision down and frontline up, it's all in the way you sell the change. If you go in there with complete negativity with the change, then obviously that's how it's going to be received as negativity. And who takes the blame for it? The individual supervisor. When in fact that, these policies and changes came from above. The way you sell it to your staff is, everything. Seek their input and let them know, guys, this is what ultimately has come down. This is what we have to do. The question is, how do we do it without, adding undue burdens onto ourselves? How can we make this work? Not, walking in there and going, okay, fucking Gangi came out with another SOP.
Right.
Now on top of everything else we got to do, now we got to add this shit to it. So just be aware. This is what you have to do now. Instead of going in there and saying, hey, look, guys, Gangi wants to make a change to the way we're doing this. The question is, how do we do this and make it work without adding, undue burden onto ourselves? How can we make this work and fit this into everything else we got going on? I need some input from you guys. Two totally different ways of selling it.
Yeah, but you're spot on, Joe, because obviously good morale does really relate on transparency. We did a show recently about building a cohesive team, which all starts with trust, which allows for conflict, which allows for commitment, which allows for accountability, which ultimately allows for results. And we talked about that. We broke down that whole model. For this part here, if I'm looking as management now to push a good effort, and again, I was looking for the book. I know I have the book here, but I definitely have it on Kindle. Cotter developed an 8-stage model for change. The first part of the change, when you're going to create change, is creating a level of urgency. And we talked about that. If you got a culture that's complacent because they're used to it, it's always been that way, then you got to put a level of urgency in to get the buy-in. But you also have to develop, and we kind of discussed it, a guiding coalition, people from the front line, or people that have also some influence. We need people that may have certain titles, because you got obstacles that are going to be in your way. So it can't be just frontline driven. It has to be a shared partnership where everybody has equal value, and they will help get you the influence that you need that will start shifting that perspective. So granted, and I'm not talking about a superficial attempt here, guys. We're talking about long-term changes that must be maintained. So another good thing about having people on the floor is that they can maintain it in your absence, because that's the biggest thing. It's if you have influence is really when you're not there, because that's when it's honest influence. So I'm looking at this point is you got to get a smaller group of people that kind of represent the majority, from frontline. And yes, you do need some higher ups, because there'll be obstacles that only they can move. But granted, you do need people together to help get the buy-in, because if you're going in thinking you could do this alone, and I don't know whether it's your position that has a negative reputation because of people that held it before you, or whether it's you fucked up in the past and now you're trying to change your ways. You can't do it alone, because either your position or you yourself are going to be questioned. So you need people that can buy in and you can borrow on their influence. And again, you're not looking to change everyone, because that's not going to happen. You can't, at one point it's like, you know what, this person's not worth it. There's nothing I can do here. You want to get the people that are on the fence. That's the key. You want to get the people that are on the fence. And how I've done it is, when I have dialogue about change and I'm communicating with somebody, I look for the dialogue to evolve. I say A, you say B, I say C, you do D, F, E, F, G, straight on up the alphabet. But if we're having a dialogue, I say A, you say B, I say C, you go back to B, I say D, you go back to B, I say E, you go back to B, you're too resistant for me. You're not making any effort to elevate the dialogue. So you do need people that are there that, that have influence, that can help shift that negative bias, that generalized assumption. Again, the generalized assumption of, people in management just never care. Well, not this guy. Not this guy. This is what he's trying to do, A, B, C, D, E. But now if you try to translate the message, like Joe said, and you don't got the trust, it's superficial. But if you start building a rapport and really invest in those early adopters, there's people that agree with, what you're trying to present and are willing to take the risk strategically to try to meet that, then you're going to unload on them. You're going to give them everything so they can get buy-in, and then you're going to trust in them to carry the message out there so you could start gaining that following. And eventually what goes 10, 20, 30, 40, you start getting the people to buy in. And the good thing about it is, through those people that have influence, they're also giving you real live feedback. You know, they're becoming the voices for the people unfiltered. Look what we also did here, Joe. We flattened the hierarchy.
Yep.
We're not circumventing chain of command, but we flattened the hierarchy. We have people we trust on the floor who's helped create a message, and they're giving us things back in real time that are solid concerns that really do affect the masses and not defined by selfish wants. That's the key too. All right, let me go to the next part. Since morale can be seen as a top-down issue, sadly, most staff may truly believe that good morale solely falls into management's areas of responsibility. And maybe that can be seen as the case when it comes to introducing methods to increase morale. But with that said, a partnership between management and frontline must exist in the acceptance of what is being introduced. Without acceptance or trust, no initiative on employee morale can be introduced that will benefit the workplace. Therefore, as management, before you embark on a journey to increase morale, your first effort should be to establish trust by building credibility. Remember, some higher level titles have a negative reputation connected to them. In most cases, it could be a reputation built on the abuse of power or authority. So your effort at first must defeat the negative stigma connected to the position. Basically, staff have to define the position through the person wearing the title and not the other way around. And the best way to accomplish that endeavor is by walking around and getting to know your people, and in return, they get to know you. Listen as they state what they expect from you, and then, with their needs in mind, state what you expect from them. It's an intentional effort on both sides to build a strong, trusting relationship, and this takes time. That's, Joe, I think when we did our last book here, right here, House Student Corrections, there's a section here, it's Leadership by Walking Around. And I think you did the quote for that, right?
I did. Yes, sir.
I know my books.
Absolutely.
But Joe, how does this play out here?
You know, I found that over time, you know, titles come with, like you said, the stigma. Senior warden, you know, they never do nothing but sit in their office and bark orders. You know, majors and captains, same thing. They don't, all they do is sit in their office, do paperwork, do reports. You know, and even some lieutenants are blamed for doing the same thing. And I found that breaking that stigma was not as hard as everybody thought it was, because, you know, if you make yourself visible, if you invest in your staff, make yourself, you know, make your presence known to everybody, both, you know, to your staff and the offender population, over time, you wind up breaking that stigma. And you hear it all too often. Damn, Lieutenant, you know, you're out here on the floor a lot. You know, we see you all the time. You know, all these other lieutenants don't do that. Well, you know, and my response always was, I'm not like other lieutenants. You know, I truly remembering where you came from plays a huge part in where you're going, because it helps you along the way. And when you remember back how things were when you were a CO, you know, and leadership by walking around was always one of my biggest pet peeves. You know, I wanted my staff to see me every day. I wanted my staff to know that I'm there for them every day. I wanted the staff and the offender population to know that, you know, I'm walking around looking at things.
Right. And I'm going to see if I can actually, because now here's a good thing. When you get these books from Blue 360 Media, you can actually, they give you an app in which the book is available. And then what you could do is you can actually search what you're looking for. So if I put leadership by walking around, it comes up as chapter 124. I click on it, and there's Joe's quote, instant access to what you're looking for. And Joe's quote was, leadership by walking around is one of the true fundamentals that allow you to be visible, connect with your staff, and provide you with the opportunity to teach. And guys, this is, if you have the book, you may want to revisit it. It's chapter 124 of How to Succeed in Corrections, which is this book right here. In the new book, just to let you guys know, you're going to find that my passages are a little bit longer, even though there's less tips. The passages are a little bit longer to read. So again, check that out if you want to connect to Joe's thoughts. Chapter 124, Leadership by Walking Around. Now, with that said, time is not always on our side, and morale is definitely an issue that can become more complex as time passes. So in your effort to build credibility, find those who have influence and invest time with them. Seek their partnership and investment in creating a workplace culture that showcases value and fulfillment. And guys, real quick, I want to add something before I finish this. Leaders are vulnerable in nature. They know that they're not perfect. So when you do this walking around and, you know, and you want to gain influence with the people that, you know, you feel could carry a strong message, that have leadership potential that you may want on your side, they're going to tell you the brutal reality of how you are seen, how you are perceived. And if you're walking around with a shield and you take everything they're saying as they're against you or personal, you're doing it all wrong. You have to go around and when you take that feedback, it really is a statement of curiosity and what you could do better. And sadly, one last thing, even if you may disagree with it, because it happens, it's still how they see you. So your disagreement is not going to change their perspective. It's not. So remember, you got to kind of go there with an open mind, because if you're going to try to build influence, vulnerability is key when it comes to creating that influence. That means that you're not the first person to speak. Because if you're the first person to speak, you're going to bias the room because, again, you're in a high position. Who wants to speak truth to power? There's a section of that in the last book, How to Succeed in Corrections. You're going to have to allow everybody else to speak first so you can get an honest opinion of what people want or need in the room. And another thing is also, if there's a disagreement, as long as it's professional, because there's trust in the room and it's not personal, you should do what you can to allow people to feel that they can have conflict. So you want to encourage it, because that's the way you grow. When it comes to employee morale, it is a team effort. And without the help or needed assistance of those who have greater influence, like peers, supervisors, etc., the timing will never be right. You need to invest with those who have influence, because with their investment, with their sense of ownership into what is being created, it will minimize or negate any counter influence that surfaces through staff's hopeless acceptance. Remember, it may be tough to get to everyone, but through the diffusion of innovation, we can work with our influencers, a small but powerful amount, and utilize their reach, their influence, to garner the support needed for you to create positive momentum. Any thoughts on that, Joe, before we go into the next couple of paragraphs that end the article? Any thoughts on that with the guiding coalition, you want to call them?
Oh yeah, with one of my older quotes was, with consistency, you can always defeat a bucket full of negativity with a handful of positivity. Pairing yourself, or getting with the few that align not so much with the same goals, but the same intimacy and passion for the job that you have. With those few, you can always overrule the negative.
Joe, I totally agree. And I want people to know that everything we're talking about here, as a leader, you're not looking to impress, you're looking to make an impact. So I think that kind of opens you up to being vulnerable and walking next to your people. And again, questions out of curiosity and not judgment, and you're building trust. So listen, if you have trust with people, even if you don't agree, it doesn't become personal, or it shouldn't become personal. It's not about a win-loss. I trust you. I know you're going to do what's best for me, just as I want to do what's best for you. So if I'm doing something wrong, tell me. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have those conflicts, we're not going to grow. And literally, you stagnate. I'm not naive. None of what is said above happens overnight. It's truly a continuous effort to create and maintain good, positive momentum. Good employee morale is not a one-stop destination, but rather a continuous journey in which ongoing efforts to eliminate the hopeless acceptance of the negative must be maintained. It's a partnered investment where ideas are exchanged between frontline and management, all within the context of value in the work, by showing appreciation to the workforce. It's building positive momentum by creating small wins that exercise some level of control over staff's happiness and overall job fulfillment. It's taking control of what we can control and changing our attitude and efforts into what we cannot. Before I get to the closing paragraph, I want to mention that it says small wins. When you're creating influence and you're building a rapport with your people on the floor, there could be little concerns that you may think are very simplistic because you have the authority to change them, but in their mind, it's not because they never had the authority. So it's funny how when you look at it from a management perspective, well, why ain't that already being done? That's crazy. How simple is that? It's because they didn't have the authority to do it. So there's a lot of people tend to avoid wanting to speak the front line because they think they're going to be coming up with these concerns that are impossible to decide against or to make a decision on. And most of the time they're not. They're very simple concerns that have just been overlooked or just, unfortunately, the problem we've just gotten so used to that we don't want to disrupt it by doing you get so stuck in comfortability that you're afraid to disrupt it. But the problem is you'll live in shit for as long as you can because you're afraid that if you step out of it, it's going to be more complicated. No, sometimes you got to go through the effort because in the long term it matters. But when I was when I was management, sometimes you think when you're walking around, man, what problems are they going to give me that they're probably going to be impossible to solve? And it turns out they're not. They're actually very simplistic because you got the authority to solve it. For them, it's hard because for them, they don't have the authority. So the fact that you come down, flatten the hierarchy and are ear to them, you start hearing these concerns. You find out, shit, these are easy to be done. I don't know why I haven't been doing them before. What is going on? It's because, one, some people may not have the courage to talk to you because not everybody has interactions with people at the highest of levels. So you got to really take into account that those interactions could have a lot of value behind it. Trust me, even though it may be routine, these people feel that, hey, this person, I can't believe they're even talking to me to some extent. But a lot of these concerns are very easily solved for you because you have the authority to solve them. And I think a lot of management is under this wrong impression that they're going to go down there and be given the same bullshit. It could be, but not most of the time. Most of the time, you're going to get someone that's going to come out and say, hey, you think we could just do A? Yeah, why don't you do it at A? Well, I don't know. Just I try to bring it up and, it just never makes it where it's got to go, or it's just not as important to people. So it gets loosed out as it travels up the chain of command because there's so many other important issues that A always gets overlooked. And now here I am. Now you get a chance to speak to me. And for me, A is important to me because that's your morale. So here's the funny thing. A lot of people that are in the chain of command, they may not understand the importance of morale, maybe because it can't be measured or it's not emergent. But I understand it because my job is not managing the technical. My job is to manage the people who manage the technical. So that morale thing is important to me. So sadly to say, when you pass it up the proper chain of command, just wasn't given enough importance because at that time it's a prison. I have other things to worry about, and they're so focused on technical and task and all this other stuff. And then you get the chance to speak for your people and try something that's related to morale. And I'm like, holy shit, that's simple. We could do that. So you'll be shocked in those efforts. You may come out more as the good person than the bad person. Joe, what's your thoughts on that? Because that's something we could maybe even further a discussion on its own.
When it comes to making decisions and doing things on a daily basis, everybody, all they want is to be involved. You can let them, we'll take a maintenance issue. I once had a correctional officer call me and said, hey, there's a leak in the pipe chase, behind this inmate cell and it's leaking into a cell. I said, okay, so what are you going to do? And their question like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? Well, what are you going to do? Don't we have to submit a work order and have maintenance come do it? No. Generally, you can get a maintenance convict out yourself and go sign out the tools and get it fixed. And that officer learn, not only are you giving that officer the chance to be involved in the decision-making process, it's kind of a twofold thing. You're also giving him the opportunity to get something fixed and build a little bit of trust and rapport with the inmate population because, crap, man, Gangi was on the block and, I had all this water coming into my cell and then he got on the phone and next thing I know, he's coming back with tools and a maintenance convict and he got that fixed for me. Yep. Unbeknownst that, I was the one that told him, you can do this. You don't have to, necessarily run it through management. All you got to do is let me know that you're going to do it. And in the grand scheme of things, everybody just wants to be involved. It's communication. Communication has to be two ways, no matter what you do. We put information into a computer, we get information back out of a computer. We put information into a telephone, we get information back out of a telephone. Communication is always two-way. It never should be one-way communication. That will destroy the morale of a shift and an agency quicker than anything.
Yeah, and Joe, you're spot on, Joe. The funny thing about managing people is a lot of people may not see it as a priority because they get so overwhelmed with the task of the day, because that could be overwhelming out of prison, especially if you're working at a busy facility where it's just paperwork upon paperwork. So it is good for management to come back down and remind people of the importance and just keep on reminding people so we don't lose those messages. And then once more people believe that those messages are heard, they're going to be more empowered to pass those messages up as opposed to thinking it's going to be dismissed. I mean, think about it. You say one concern to Joe. I mean, sometimes it's about timing too, guys. Let's get it correct. I mean, Joe's got 5 codes going on. I'm going to go to Joe and say, hey, Joe, staff was wondering if they could bring in soda. Yeah, Joe's be like, what the fuck? I don't care about that right now. I got 5 codes going on. But when time permits, all I'm saying, when time permits, and Joe is, maybe sitting there, nothing urgent going on, and someone comes in and says, hey, can we do A for morale? And Joe's like, stop morale. Morale will never. Now this is supervisor talking about, which matters even worse, which matters even more, because that's even worse, because that's the filter, that's the lid. That's the lid right there. If a supervisor doesn't believe in it, if that mentality is traveling up, then damn well it's not making its way to management 100%. So if Joe could give a shit about morale and he's, let's say, a sergeant or a lieutenant, and he's like, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. Now this person who's trying to do the right thing becomes less likely to bring it up to not just Joe, but to anybody else. Because I'm going to tell you something. When it comes to this ideas for employee morale, it does take a level of vulnerability because nobody wants to discuss it. Everybody just wants to accept it the way it is. And when you finally get someone to have the courage to say, hey, I think if we do this, it could be better. The moment they get shut down, it could affect them permanently from ever bringing it back up again. And now we get right back to what's the status quo. That's what the facility wants to be at, because anytime you make an effort to move past it, there's Joe squashing it. I'm done. Because after Joe told me no, I was embarrassed. Think about that. Joe, what's your thoughts on that? Because I see you nodding your head on that. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately times you see those type of supervisors that, instead of one-upping the initiative to raise morale, they're always squashing it. And that, that was something that always kind of burned my ass a little bit. When you see somebody intentionally squash that shit, because, and their mindset is like, it's not going to change anything. Bullshit. You don't know exactly, you don't know truly what is going to change unless you do it. If somebody came to me and said, hey, is it okay if I bring these root beers in? I was always the type to one up that shit. Well, shit. How about we go to food service, go get some damn ice cream. We just make everybody floats. You got to find a way to one up it instead of squash it.
Yeah. And I got a guy that he watches our videos. He's trying to do this stuff. And he even says, he goes, Gangi, I'm going to tell you something. Oh, let me get myself on screen here. Let me tell you something, Gangi. It's extremely hard, but if you really stay through with it works. But you got to be willing to kind of go through the battle first. And the battle is tough because people have settled in their ways. So, you got to realize that this is going to be very rocky ground. You're introducing something that's never been done before. So if you go in willing to do it, you got to be ready to fight and not give up, because the worst thing, Joe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, the worst thing is going in and getting knocked out in the first punch and deciding that you're not going to go do it again. Now your credibility, everything is just, that's hard to rebuild from. Would you agree with that, Joe? The initial effort, but then consistent
and that's absolute, because 90% of the times when somebody asks a question like that and they get shut down immediately, chances are and you're absolutely right, chances are they're not going to ask the question again to you. nor are they going to ask the question to anybody else, because, they're going to go, if somebody else mentions it, they're going to say, well, shit, Pomponio shut that. I mean, I didn't even get the sentence out of my mouth. Pomponio shut it down. He said, so I'm done with that shit, and the way the choices you make and the way you influence, man, it carries a lot of weight.
It's true, Joe. And then I just want to get the closing thought here from the article, and then we can wrap it up. In closing, creating and maintaining good morale is an ongoing partnership effort between frontline and management. It's all about building trust and then allowing for the trust to create good relations within the workplace. If trust is in play, efforts made towards positive change will be appreciated. Then the shift in perspective as defined by trust will not be based on false promises, but rather a commitment to the effort where the transparency is. Effort is where you need the transparency, because outcome is seen, effort not so much. So if people are transparent in their efforts, people start to appreciate the promise of something. I'm not going to say the promise. Sorry, let me rephrase that, because how I wrote it in my other books is, when you're transparent with your efforts, people see the commitment as opposed to a false promise of an outcome. That's what I meant to say. And within the context, increasing positive employee morale may be seen by many as a top-down initiative, but it is truly reinforced through the efforts of the front line to not just accept the initiative, but invest and take ownership in it. Okay, Joe, I'd love to get your closing thoughts. A lot here to wrap up. I thought this was a great dialogue. I think this is something that eventually we could formulate and really push out for public consumption, whether we decide to devote a book on this, and I mean, really a step-by-step plan, or whether we just kind of go out there and just teaching it, or people can even take this video and, again, here's the knowledge, find out how you can apply it, because there's enough that we just gave today that has application, as long as you I guess the key here is to push away from accepting or accepting the negative, or just putting blame out in an effort to accept the negative without having the courage to intentionally make an effort to find that level of fulfillment. Joe, what would you like to say in closing, Joe? Because there's a lot here.
Yeah, there is a lot, in the grand scheme of things, and in general, morale takes not only commitment, effort, being genuine, good communication, and consistency. You have to, if you want your folks to invest in you, you got to invest in your folks. If you want your folks to communicate with you, you have to communicate with them. And if you allow them to give you the input, they will always give you the output. Do things not just from the heart, but, try to raise morale with integrity. Don't be superficial. Don't be fake. Investing in your staff, that is the number one priority. Always invest in your staff. If you invest in them, they will invest in you every time, and everything else will fall into place.
I love that, guys. As I try to create positive morale, especially what I'm doing, not just locally at my facilities, but also within Tier Talk, within my readings. I mean, I read leadership books. I mean, I have a lot of stuff here, if you could see behind, that are really never been applied to corrections. So I have to kind of try to figure out how I can apply it. And they work, because, it's just, they're unique. And a lot of it, believe it or not, goes against what our impulses are. Got to get to the masses real quick. No, slow it down. I find that it's tough, because, guys, this is the key here. Most of us, when we move up, obviously a lot of us usually move up more closer to the end of our career. And a lot of times we don't have a lot of time left. So a lot of us are in the rush for stuff that's short term. I want to fix things now because I'm not here next year. And a lot of these plans really aren't about fixing things, but rather starting the momentum and just doing what you can to fuel it. And then when you leave, you still got the momentum going. So it's not about, I don't think it's so much about creating permanent fixtures where, the outcome's there. When you leave, everybody could say, yeah, you really created a difference. It's more about the journey of putting things in place that can actually keep moving things forward. Corrections is complex. It's not a difficult profession. It's a complex profession. And what I mean by that is, it just, problems if you don't settle it, they just build on top of each other. And you got to kind of work in real time to settle these concerns. So again, you just got to create the right mindset in people, the positive mindset, knowing where to look when everything else is telling them to look this way. I need you to look this way. I don't think anybody's going to come in and honestly say that they have the answer to everything. But if you create good momentum, that momentum will pretty much remove every obstacle in the way. As opposed to, unfortunately, some people look for perfection and then they never move. This isn't about perfection, guys. If you want to create change, change is both emotional and rational. It's both, but you gotta have. You can't be blinded by emotion, right? But you also can't be frozen by, metrics or whatever it is that you're looking for. I mean, you got to be able to fuel the people in corrections. Corrections, in my opinion, we want to feel the change. We don't want someone teaching us numbers and 50% this way. No, we want to feel it. We want to go in and feel it so then we can move. Everything about corrections is really how we feel. I run to a code to protect somebody because I feel love for that individual. You got to be able to connect to the people's feelings. And I honestly think fulfillment comes by knowing how to speak to the heart of the individuals who do the job every day. But I want to say something in return. Middle management are still people too who are trying to make a difference. And usually they are the biggest ones that are able to facilitate change because their job, again, is to be the translator between the strategic and the tactical to strategic. But they are the ones that have to lift up the voice and do what they can to motivate both sides to stay invested. And I think sometimes when they're caught in the pressures of it all, people forget and they overwhelm middle management with things that are out of their control from both sides. I mean, sometimes my people could tell me what to do, and I'm like, how am I going to translate that? Let me try my best. And if it doesn't work out, how do I tell the people above me that I failed? Especially because these are things that aren't in my control. So I think having an understanding of the pressures of middle management and having some level of forgiveness in regards to some expectations that really. Here's the funny thing: when you're in middle management, which is I think one of the toughest positions to be in, is it's all about the wants of everyone else around you, or the needs of everyone else around you, and then it's very rare that someone ever asks you, "Well, what would you want, or what do you need?" Because your job really is to facilitate the messages both ways. So just don't forget that middle management also. Needs to have good morale. And what are we doing for them? I mean, am I talking about recognition? I'm talking about appreciation. When was the last time we thanked our administrators? When was the last time, and I know some people are like, well, when was the last time they thanked us? I stop. I didn't ask that. Remember, this is about intentionality. It's not, thank you shouldn't be reciprocal. I don't need to be thanked to know that if someone did good by me, I'm going to thank them for doing good. That's another thing about culture. You don't want to be a reciprocal culture where I only do for you because you've done for me. Imagine a marriage like that. Well, I'll wash the dishes because my wife cooked. No, you should just know to do it. You're not doing it because of conditions. You're doing it because I love her, and I'm going to take care of the dishes because I should take care of the dishes. Not because she made dinner, but because I appreciate her and I'm going to go ahead and do the dishes. And I'm saying this because I know Joe, I know all of us. I mean, we know corrections could take a toll on you. But having said that, I think we need to be appreciated more. So once you're appreciated, it brings back the value that sometimes we forget. But I haven't said that, so I went on a little bit of a ramble. Unless Joe wants to add on that, we can come to a close, but I don't want to be rude. Joe, is there an added thought or we're good to go? Your call. Joe, if you want to add a thought, add the thought, and then you can close the show for the day. Just don't forget to recommend my books and make sure people subscribe. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, folks. So, be passionate, be genuine, have open communication with everybody that you interact with. Communication is one of the keys to maintaining morale on your shift. to maintaining morale within departments, and just overall, keeping things where they should be. And Ganji, you say that stuff so fast, I'm going to let you close it out.
I knew you were going to do that. I even took off my glasses, was starting to relax. And all right, so guys, don't forget I got my books on the market. You have Manipulation Decoded, How to Succeed in Corrections, and I did do the. Actually, I got people texting me now already. They pre-ordered the book, but again, the book here is Tips for New Correctional Officers and Their Supervisors. That's due out February 29th, but most likely, if you pre-order it, you'll probably get it sooner. You'll probably get it around the same time I get it. And guys, if you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.